to our webinar, Working as a Team in the Virtual Environment. And I'm sure that you have, let me move the screens a little bit so you see the title of the screen. So I'm sure that you all know that 50% or more than 50% of the information is transmitted and received on through nonverbal communication. It is through our posture, it's how we're breathing, how we enter the room, how we introduce ourselves, even without words. But obviously in the 2D environment that we're in right now, we're only limited to the shoulders and up. So it is very important to collect as much information, because that information is critical for us, as possible from the facial cues and what you see on the screen. So when you have communication in the virtual environment, you want to establish connection. So be aware of glasses, and everybody who is on the screen right now have glasses, but just be mindful that the glare prevents people from seeing your real eye expression. So I'm also eye-wearing person, but eyeglasses-wearing person, but I'm taking mine off because I want to establish connection. Why is it important? I truly believe we can be happy at the workplace. Right now, being segregated and not working as a team in a common space builds the distance between us. But our goal is to connect with people, have a clear communication, understand each other. And through this feeling of understanding and belonging, people can really establish feeling good and positive self-expression, self-actualization at work. And that's what we need to strive for, especially in the more emotional times that we're experiencing right now. So we need to understand the person and engage them in what we're doing. So I want to introduce myself. Edward did a nice job. Why you actually can trust my opinion here. I have been HR leader for 20 years, and I have led global teams, international teams in United States, Europe, and Asia. My most recent job, I was HR leader for European region with responsibility over 11 countries. So obviously I didn't see my team on the regular basis, but having the connections, understanding of their communication types helped me to have a very strong communication and high engagement. And I can tell you, it's definitely possible to have highly engaged and productive team in the virtual environment. I put my picture here, not because I'm narcissist, but because I was HR leader in manufacturing environment, and it was important for me to establish credibility there as well. So you can see the clothes I was wearing is black and white, sharp edges, because clothes also speaks a lot about us, and it helps people either to feel that you build the distance or you are very easy to access and talk to. So for me in that environment, it was important to build the distance, where when I'm talking with you, I have much more mellow colors, and I'm trying to make it more comfortable for you to connect with me. So everything matters, everything speaks the story. So the method that we are going to rely on, it is proprietary method that was put together by my partner from the Netherlands and I. It is built based on the clinical research and further development by the University of Amsterdam. It is a method that will help us to discover communication personalities of the individuals we work with based on the facial cues and categorization of those in correlation with the communication specifics, how they like to accept information, what their leadership style is, and what environment they work best at. So based on the face value, we developed several courses, and maybe Edward and I will partner on presenting them later on to you, but today we're specifically focusing on working as a team in the virtual environment. So we will cover these topics today, and we'll go through as much as possible, but if we run out of time, then we'll do follow-up session. But what I want to cover today is an introduction to conscious and unconscious nonverbal communication. We will practice to recognize emotions and talk about their specifics. We'll introduce nonverbal patterns and communication personalities that correlate with those. We'll talk about working as a team with different communication types, which is the most important, and also communication strategies that we can employ. And the last thing is the truth and engagement indicators that will help us to see and understand the current communication with the individual. So, as I mentioned, face is the strongest and most refined communication channel. And on the face, you can notice conscious and unconscious facial cues. So conscious facial cues similar to gestures, and they actually originate from the same side of the brain where the verbal center is, left side. And they help us to emphasize the message. For example, when I want to pay special attention to what I'm saying, I elevate my eyebrows. Different people have different mimic that supports it. Unconscious, it's something that is not monitored or manipulated, and it's actually very interesting that the recipient, the person who's looking at you at that moment, receives that information before you become aware of it. And so our ability to read that information and understand it gives us the wealth of information that we wouldn't have otherwise. So when we're talking about unconscious expression, we will talk about three categories: emotions, personal patterns, personal repetitive patterns, that's kind of understood, and then truth indicators. So we will spend time on each of them. So when we talk about emotions, it's a universal system of signals that is consistent for all people all over the world. There are some maybe little deviation, but majority are consistent, and it's in our DNA, because people who are not able to see from the birth actually employ the same facial expressions as the people who see and collect information from each other. More than that, in the theory of evolution, Darwin actually expressed that there is a similarity in expression of emotions between Homo sapiens and animals. So this is something that we can definitely rely on. The second category that we wanted to review today are patterns. Patterns are personal, repetitive facial cues, and they're typical for the individuals. And based on those cues, we establish the communication personalities. We will talk about how those patterns developed a little bit further in our presentation. And the last one is the truth indicators. So another word, and maybe something that you can relate closer to, is the double message. So it's something that it contradicts what you're saying. So for example, I'm saying, I'm confident in that. So here I'm giving you double message. I'm saying confidence, and I'm raising my shoulders, which is a signal for lack of confidence. Or I'm saying my boss was a fantastic guy, and I'm closing my eyes. And if I do it repetitive, it's our opportunity to dig deeper. If it's an accident, or actually a person is really feeling that. If that's repetitive, then the person puts the barrier between their previous boss or current boss and themselves. So opportunity to dig deeper. So let's concentrate on emotional facial cues first. Do you have any questions before I dig in?
No.
All right. So there are 6 basic emotions that were categorized by Dr. Paul Ekman. There's lots and lots of different categorization. Even back to the ancient times, Aristotle categorized 14 different emotions. So while we're taking probably most known American categorization by Dr. Paul Ekman, but it's not the shortest list of emotions. The shortest one was later categorized by University of Scotland, and it was a 4 categorization, so just 4 basic emotions. But if you look at the whole list of emotions, there's over 200. So these are just the foundational ones. So anger, and when the pictures appear, I want you to pay attention to the actual, how the person is looking and what muscles are engaged. So anger, you can see The eyebrows are actually lowered and the eyelids are lifted, and that creates the impression of the glare and also very intense muscles around the lips. Fear, the person is pulled back. You can see elevated eyebrows, elevated eyelids, the muscles around the mouth is kind of pulled back. So disgust is very easy to spot. It's all the facial muscles are pulled in the middle of the face around the nose. It's like you're smelling something bad. So eyebrows lowered, lips are up, kind of pulled towards the nose, eyes are narrowed. Surprise and fear, very similar. So if in fear, the eyebrows elevated more in a flat way, everything in surprise is round. It's like a letter O. Zero or eyes that are more rounded, mouth and eyebrows. Happiness is easy to spot, but there are so many different ways of expressing yourself through smile. It can be a more polite smile or social smile, or it could be true happiness. So when the muscles around the eyes are engaged, that shows more pure happiness and genuine smile. But many times you can separate face in two parts, and the bottom is smiling and the top looks like nothing is happening. So, you know, in that case, person is doing the more social, polite smile, pacifying the person they're talking with. And sadness. Sadness is a kind of a roof of the building, so everything pulled in the middle. So you can see the eyebrows and then also the opposite direction, the corners of the mouth going back down. So when we're talking about physiology, and I'm not going to go deep into the chemistry and physiology here, but I just want you to know that different emotions activate different parts of automatic nervous system, and parasympathetic nerve is reacting when we can relax. It's our freeze or relaxation, and sympathetic nerve is our fight and flight reaction. So emotions that activate sympathetic nerve, so fight or flight, it's our fear, the fear when we act aggressively, when we need to quickly jump or move. It's definitely anger, and it's also happiness that is associated with excitement. And then parasympathetic, where we can relax and digest or freeze, it's disgust, because something unpleasant is happening around you and you want to hide and slow down. It's sadness, because it gives you opportunity to regroup and not use so much energy. And it's also happiness that is either relief happiness or just calm happiness when you experience pleasant either taste or feelings. So we can feel inside of us what system is activated, because if your heartbeat is elevated, if you feel adrenaline rush, it's definitely your sympathetic nerve that is engaged. So let's practice for a few minutes to recognize emotions. So what emotion do you see right here?
Sadness.
Very good. And we see those roof of the house, right? So that elevated eyebrows in the middle and the sadness around the lips. Very good. And what do we have here?
Happiness.
Very good. Thank you, Heather. And with happiness, again, there's so many different ways of experiencing happiness. When you lost your puppy and you found it, it's a different happiness that you on the beautiful resort and you're enjoying yourself. My goal is to help employees to be happy at work, but it's not tickle happy, but more happy through positive self-expression and feeling connected and feeling belonging. So that's what I'm striving for, and that's why the face value exists, and why we're working hard to help people to recognize each other's communication style and connect. All right, what do we have here?
Anger, upset.
It's
Anger, upset.
sick.
Anger, like upset.
Yeah, but anger's a little bit possible because we have lower eyebrows and a little bit looks like glare, but remember the emotion that pulls everything around your nose. So the lips going up, the eyes going down, disgust. So she's smelling something bad, she's feeling disgusted. So, but I can see where we can confuse it a little bit. So right here, yeah. All right. So now I'm complicating the task because those were too easy. So what common emotion is here?
Huh.
Mad.
Mad. Very good. So it's emotion anger. And on the left side, you can see it much more clear because she's clearly glaring. So it's raised eyelids and lowered eyebrows create that glare. And then her muscles around her lips are very strongly engaged. Where the person on the right, it's suppressed anger. So because of the glasses, we cannot see clearly his eyes, but you can see the frown and his eyebrows lowered. When the person showing tongue, it's usually suppressing the feelings. So in this case, it looks like suppressed anger. Anytime you see that on the person, you want to dig down and see what exactly happening. Not maybe in public, but later on in private. All right, and what emotions do we have here? It's two different ones, but there's similar features.
Surprise?
Surprise, absolutely. The little boy on the left is surprised. It's everything is like, oh, everything is rounded. And then similar one, but a little bit different with eyebrows. Here's a little bit more like a roof of the building, but in general, it's both ends are elevated. So it's a fear. So we got through it. Very good. Good job. So, went very fast. So we will go back and look at the different expressions. And what I want to cover here is actually intensified and de-intensified microexpressions. So how would you call this picture? What would you say? What is first feel that it creates?
Can you repeat the question?
What, looking at this picture, what feelings does it create first? How would you describe this picture?
It's really mad.
It is mad, yes, it's intense. So it's a lot of intensified movements on this picture. You can see a very engaged forehead, engaged narrowed eyes with elevated eyebrows, open active mouth, and the whole body is extremely active. So the person is expressing very aggressive emotion with a full engagement of his facial muscles and facial cues. And then the second picture, what would you say here? It is difficult. Because from one side she's calm, but from another side she doesn't look comfortable, right? So you can see that her elevation of her head is beyond comfortable. If you try to elevate your head right now to this level, you will realize that you're restricting your airflow. The same way if you're putting your head very low. In both cases, you are pacifying yourself. You're not allowing you to feel what you're really feeling. Also, the gesture of touching your face or your hair is self-pacification. So a person is trying to calm down. She also has a relaxed bottom of her face, even though her eyes look a little bit worried. So in this case, she almost looks like she is going into the trance, where she's like a turtle emerges into her shell, allowing her body to be present, but her mind is going away. So this is very interesting. She is suppressing her emotions. But the interesting part about suppressing emotions, it doesn't take the negative part of the feelings away. Suppressing the positive feelings actually takes a little bit positivity off. So emotional intelligence is very important for us, is not to just suppress emotions, but find the adequate way of expressing them and not allowing yourself stay in the situation where you are uncomfortable. But what I want, for the sake of the learning the facial cues, what I want you to learn here is that the relaxed, pacifying way of expressing yourself is on this face, other than just a little bit mark between her eyebrows where there could be a touch of frown. And then this is much more adequate conversation. The person is expressing herself. She has some intensity with engaged muscles under her eyes, but at the same time, she's giving the social smile to the person she's talking with, helping her to feel more comfortable and pacifying her through the conversation. So she's building the communication bridge through that. So independently on experiencing emotions, people have their way of reacting to different situations. This is something that comes from childhood, and it's based on the patterns that we established in the childhood and then reinforced through our lives. It sometimes looks like the person has emotions stuck on their face, like sadness, or it could be very explicit features that could look a little bit aggressive. So this is something that we can help people to realize and work with, but it's on the unconscious level, and through our method, using the reading of those facial cues, repetitive facial cues, we can help person to recognize what communication personalities they have and what communication personality of others they work with. So this is a little card we put together, and what we do is we actually, while we're working with people, we count how many certain facial cues they express or they show, and based on that, we establish personality, communication personality. So that will be our segue to the communication personality part and the patterns. So here I am introducing you the communication personalities. We used actually well-known sweet fairy tale called Princess Bride, and that fairy tale helped me to help you visualize the different communication parties. So the number one on the bottom is observer. It's a person who is sensing. It's a person who has a relaxed face on the bottom, and a lot of times would have wide under irises. The level of intensity of the observer is very low. It's people who don't change you. When you meet observers, you feel very comfortable about yourself. They're like air. They allow you to be yourself. The other two types, mover and analyst, they're much more intense. The intensity goes up with those types. So if you look at the mover, it's people who want to make an impact. They're excited, they're dynamic, they are moving for the sake of moving sometimes. They want to go into the action. They're fast in their ways of talking, they want to be seen, they're sometimes a little bit theatrical, and they're very expressive in their clothes. The analyst, people who are very thoughtful, they think things through, calculate, they want to be heard, because everything they say, they put a lot of thought in. And then in the middle, we have adapter, people who have features similar to everyone, and they employ them when they need. So we will go in the details, and we will start with the observer. So it's friendly giant in the movie. So when you work with observers or live with them, you will actually recognize that they're patient, that you're quiet force, people who are comfortable in the call center environment. They don't make many mistakes because they follow the procedure or they wait to see what other people do. They stick with a plan unless the different communication is given to them. They don't like change. They like to be nurtured, and they like to be comforted. When you work with an observer, in order for them to be successful at the workplace, you want to give them directions. You want to give them detailed checklists and a timeline when things need to happen. When you explain the process, they want to understand and they prefer that nothing changes. They don't like multitasking. If you want them to express their view, you have to create non-threatening environment, very calm, very positive. Sometimes you have to follow as observer after the team meeting because they might not felt comfortable expressing their view during that. And if you want to provide the effective feedback to observer, you have to appeal to the team, better for the team, emotional side, no loud voices, no sharp moves, kind of just calming. Everything is okay. We can work on this to get better. So observers are very nice people to work with. I always appreciate having them on the team. But what is important for us is to understand the strengths and the weaknesses of each type. With that, each type can evolve beyond their original type, I guess, and they can develop further, and they can reach very high level roles anywhere in the organization. For example, the good I guess example of observer is Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany. So she is, if you look at her facial expression, she is very typical observer, but she is very successful leader as well. So moving forward, let's go to the mover. So you can see very intense, engaged muscles and face cues. I had a president of the organization who was observer, who was a mover, and he hardly blinked. When he was communicating, his eyes stayed open like that almost the whole time. The typical feature, how you can recognize the mover, is the white above the irises. So the eyes are open so wide that you can see the white. Also, sometimes quite a lot of wrinkles because the level of the engagement of the muscles. Elevated eyebrows, wrinkles on the forehead, also very typical. So what movers are good at is they want to create the action. They change agents, they feel comfortable in the changing environment. They could be leaders, they inspire action, they inspire others, they definitely can build the burning platform, jump off it and get others to do it as well. They spend very little time on reflection or analysis, and they are very result oriented. When you work with a mover, you have to give them directions, but more in the blue ocean way. So we need to get there. They will give you the strategies, they will give you the ideas. You have to check with them periodically because they can end up in a completely different ocean that you intended. But at the same time, if you start micromanaging them, they feel very disengaged. Their thought is, well, if you know everything, why am I here? They're not so excited to get things done your way. They want to do it their way. They are great at multitasking. They have no problem having many balls in the air. For the jobs, the movers are good leaders, good people who come in the organization and make the change. They are not good in a kind of call center environment in the when there's standard operating procedure. They will rewrite your standard operating procedure and make everything different. So if you want them to express their views, they have no problem doing it. So you will have a hard time actually keeping them quiet. And if you want to provide them effective feedback, they don't want to hear it because they think they work so hard already and they're great. So in order for them to accept the feedback, you have to reinforce what they do right and then build on that, that in order to be just a little bit better, you have to do this and this and this. So this way they will be much more receptive. All right, and we're moving to analysts. So the guy you can see is thinking lines, kind of in the middle, the narrowed eyes. He is a little critical and thoughtful, very judgy, not relaxed. The analyst will be very expressive, and the level of intensity is high when they're expressing themselves, but at the same time, when they're receiving information, you will notice them doing this, kind of pulling back a little bit because they need time to process the information. But when they're expressing, they go, and that's sometimes it's hard for them to stop talking as well. So need to be heard. They definitely think through alternatives. They need to understand the history, the trend. They have hard time moving to the action. So if you put analyst and a mover together, if it's a good, strong team and they're respecting each other, that is your recipe for success. If you put observer following them, that's fantastic team because things are done following the procedure that analysts put together, mover gets into the action and observer follows it. So that's ultimately recipe for success. So when you work with the analyst, you have to give them dilemma or goal. Many analysts are in the financial field, in data, working with the data, but they're also good in evaluating organization and putting together the strategy. You have to give them clear timeline because otherwise they will get too happy in developing process to no end. It's your engineers also. It's sometimes hard to get engineers understand go-to-market strategy and how the actual business works because they can spend a lot of time developing the product to the perfection versus specification of the customer needs. So they do need fact and history, and they have no problem dealing with change if there enough information is introduced. They don't like multitasking, but they can deal with it. When you want to express the feedback to the analyst, you have to be very factual and data-driven. And they will have no problem expressing their views, but after they thought it through. So sometimes you need a little bit of time. There are secondary types. So human beings are not as simple, unfortunately, as one type only. So we do tend to have at least two different types that we can rotate between and unconsciously change our basic strategy. And it could be situational, or it could be like situation that happened in the past and employs this strategy in the specific situations. Adapter has all three different types and very interesting people to work with. They're charismatic. They're not very in touch with their own feelings, but they have very good way of connecting to feelings of others. These are your marketers, these are your salespeople who are extremely successful, and everybody feels that they are their best friend, even though they can express completely different ways of themselves with different people. There's no extremes. They don't get very mad. They don't get super happy. They're just positive guys who are very flexible. When you work with adapter, the directions that you want to give them as a clear timeline and detailed checkpoints, because again, otherwise they can completely change the strategy depending on how they're feeling. Working with adapter, if it's your boss, is tough, because if you're with analyst, you know you need to give them data. With mover, you need to show them action and the results. With observer, you need to be respectful, calm, and follow the process. With adapter, you don't know. Today he's one way, tomorrow others. So you've got to kind of figure them out and figure what triggers their response in a certain way. They like to brainstorm, present fresh energy, and they definitely need feedback. And they receive feedback pretty easily if it is to the point, not too much information, just exactly what you need them to change. Good with multitasking, no problem at all. So communication strategies with the different types. We have three types, the fourth type as well, how they interact between themselves. So I have a quick description here, and I'm gonna try to move pictures maybe here. Okay, perfect. So observer and observer, I'm going to give you a visual. It's imagine two kids playing in the sandbox next to each other. That's observers. So they like that somebody's next to them. They're keeping the communication on a superficial level. They're doing their own thing. They don't bother others. So very nice interaction. Observer and mover. So mover is wants to get results. Observer is not decisive, not very reflective, quickly expressing what's happening. Mover can get mad. Observer will retreat into their shell, hide, and say, okay. So that kind of the look of the trance will appear on their face, where the white under irises appear, and the relaxed face. So with some pacification, like we saw in that lady who was following the aggressive picture. Mover and mover. Mover and mover is two recent graduates who both have their exact vision, and they just argue loudly in the conference room, and after that they go and have beer and they're best friends again. So this is typical. They want to express themselves. They want to tell what they think. They have little recognition of what other people think, but ultimately they recognize their own type and they're perfectly fine with it. Analyst and observers. So analyst is interesting. If you work for analyst, you walk in the office and without raising the voice or anything, the analyst can make you feel like you've done everything wrong. And you walk out, you know that nothing really happened, but you feel awful because analysts just very clearly express to you where you stand. So analysts could be very sharp in the way of communicating and without bad words or raising their voice. So analyst and observer, not always a great combination because observer again can withdraw from the verbal sharpness of the analyst. Mover and analyst is an interesting show. So mover will be throwing the action points and analyst will be like, well, no, because in the past this did not prove to work because this and this happened. Mover will go to another action, analyst like, no, we need to think through this, la, la, la. So in general, if there is disagreement, analyst wins because mover gives up. They have no time to go through all the details, but if the mover is a superior, analyst can lose their job. And that's happened in front of me. Actually, I presented this to my former CEO, who was analyst, and the new president was a mover. And that's exactly what he said. Analysts can lose their job. So that's truth. When we have analysts and analysts, so it's kind of opposite of two college kids movers. They're going to sit in the conference, build the case for their own argument. Then instead of going to the bar and have a beer, they're going to go home, pull more arguments, and start another conversation the next day. Because this battle on words brings, like, it's what they live for. They cannot lose because they're so smart. So they're going to continue building their argument. Any questions?
No, so far.
All right. So I built a little communication checklist for you guys. So when you talk to the person, please, first of all, identify the desired outcome. Is it informative? Do you want to reach some conclusions? Or ultimately, what is the goal of your communication? And of course, consider the communication type of the person you engaged with, because you can structure your communication completely different to analyst and the mover. So anybody wants to give me an example how we would structure communication to analyst versus the mover? There's no wrong answer. Well, there is a little bit wrong answers, but. So, for example, if you're talking to analysts, you want to give facts and progression in the history. It's if you're presenting to analysts, that's the guys who will make sure that all the numbers in your presentation correlate to each other. And say, nope, 3 slides before you said this number, but if you take this number, subtract this number, this is not the number that's showing up. So you have to be very specific about it. If you talk to the mover, you don't want to overbury them with the details, but you want to say, we're starting at this point, we're going to get to this point in that many days. So very quick, sharp, they can ask you more questions. If you talk to the observer, you need to create calm environment and make them feel that there is engagement and positivity. Bring the version of yourself that works best in the situation to the person so they can relate to the message. We all have a little bit of different types. So when I talk to the observer, that's the most challenging type for me. I have to take a deep breath, calm down, start the conversation with not the facts or the action, but actually with connecting with person. So with that, obviously the boundaries of the individual become important. Then read people's emotions. So slow down, actually see how the person is reacting. What kind of facial cues are happening there? What emotion is originated? If they came to you already sad, this is opportunity to ask questions because again, human connection, that what creates the positivity and the positive self-experience at work. And whatever the goal of the communication was, you have to finish with a commitment of the person you're talking with so they can actually say the words to you that they understood, and that's what they're going to do about it. So with the commitment and desired timeline. With that, we're going to move to the truth and engagement indicators. So truth is a balance of the system. The whole world is built on the systematic approach. So, you know, refrigerator, it's cold inside. If you take the cover of the refrigerator, it's hot outside. So everything is yin yang. And what happens is that if the system is completely balanced, that the person is reflecting exactly what they believe is right. But if there is some unconscious or conscious disagreement with the message, it could be a concealed message, or it could be something that the person truly does not even realize that they have an issue with, their body will give you the second movement. So everybody remembers Clinton's not so appropriate, I have not had sex with this woman. And if you look at his facial expressions, so when he closes his eyes and kind of balances his head, it was obviously very uncomfortable. And you could see that the system was balancing it. It has to be repetitive response. So sometimes something is in our eye. It's not necessarily always a reflection, but it's our opportunity to ask the question in another way. As an HR person, for me, it is very important when I interview people, and I will ask several other questions, and then I will return to the question where there was some weird signal and ask it in a different way and see if the person is still doing some kind of strange move. And then I say, okay, tell me more. You liked your boss, you were okay with him, but what did you like, what you didn't like? So this is the opportunity to narrow down and find out what really happened then. So truth indicators, there is a list of things that you can attribute to the different behaviors and indicators. But what I want to narrow down here on is actually swallowing. So when we interview, we give the candidate a glass of water. When we're talking with people, like I have a drink here, but also looking at other people and looking at yourself, notice when the person is doing the drinking or doing the swallowing. Since I learned that, that became a fantastic indicator for my self-awareness, because what happens is when we swallow, we suppress our feelings. So something is coming up and we intentionally swallow. So when I talk about something emotional, I notice that I want to drink immediately and I want to pull it down. When I tell my husband, yeah, it's perfectly fine that you buy a plane, I swallow. Or yes, anything similar to that. So just recognize, why am I swallowed there? And that swallow is a little bit different than some like typical swallowing. And the same, look at the other person. But all the other signals are very strong as well. The clenching of the jaw muscles, the licking and biting the lips, the tongue that shows up, and very important is the prolonged eye closing because person is trying to hide. They're trying to pull back. They don't feel comfortable. This is quick reads. This is different with the truth indicators. This is something that I can look at all of you, say, are you guys engaged in what I'm saying or not? And the opposite spectrum is mouth open if somebody has the bottom of the face relaxed, but eyebrows elevated, they actively listening. It's like kids who are watching the show. They are in the conversation. And then the person is not engaged if they go into the trance. So white under the irises appear and they completely relax. You call their name, they might not hear you. So in the middle, you have genuine smile, active participation. Even if the person frowns, it might not be the negative reflection on what you're saying. They're just trying to be engaged, or that they are engaged and they're thinking about what you're saying. They might be already processing the information and could be having some pre-notions of that. If the person starts moving, and obviously when we do the Skype or Zoom meetings, the static picture is a little bit difficult to accept, and so many people start doing the active engagement, especially when they're talking or listening. But if the person turns head away and kind of still looks at you, they're pulling back. They're not comfortable with the information that is sharing. And even worse, if the head is low, and if in addition to you have swollen, then the person is definitely not comfortable at all. If you see that, you have to follow up after the meeting. So good, quick indications. So to leave you with something, I put together the next steps that will help you with our utilization of the method and what you learned today is become aware of your own communication personality. If you want to learn more, you can reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn. There's space-value.us, or you can reach to me as Katerina Gerdeman. So become aware of your communication personality and also become aware of what is the most difficult personality for you to engage with. Keep track of your emotions and emotions of others. Recognize when you're swallowing, recognize what's happening to you, and don't suppress those emotions, but find a way to express them properly. Encourage your team members to stretch their communication style. If you have an observer who has a potential to be a strong leader, coach them. They can get there. So just because we have certain communication preferences, it doesn't mean that we cannot, with support of others, develop beyond that. Keep track of truth and engagement indicators when you're talking to people online or in person, but obviously in the virtual environment, it becomes even more important. And so here's my connections. Now let's open for questions.
Okay, so I guess that this is the right time to start making a few questions.
I have a question. So when you're looking at different personalities, I think if you don't know someone really well, you make assumptions. Are there quizzes?
Yes.
I love quizzes because that gets right down to it. And I've done the color personality quizzes, and we've had boards that I've been on do them, and those have been super helpful in terms of, there was one board member in particular that I just couldn't read her. I didn't know if she was upset or bored or what. And then, then you realize, okay, she's this personality type. I get it. So are there ways to see that right away?
Absolutely. So so first of all, we established some of the features or facial cues that are typical for each of the types. And second, you want to follow up with questions. So you can casually ask her what activities she likes. So observer will be more calm activities, where mover will be much more aggressive activities and building more excitement in their life. Analyst will be chess and more brain activities that make them feel more engaged from analytical side. So you kind of can help. So do the initial face scan, and then second thing is do follow-up questions. So that's exactly what we're doing when we're recruiting for people. Thank you, very good question.
Brianna, do you have any question?
No, not any specific ones that I can think of. Everything was presented in really good detail. So,
Jennifer, do you have any question for Katerina? Probably is not listening yet.
So I'm going to leave you with one thing that I probably did not reflect well enough. Everybody is mixed, a little bit mixed systems. So you can hardly find a very clean observer, mover, or analyst. So for myself, I am mover analyst. So I'm the type 2-3. And for me, when I see observers, those are people that are I'm not connecting naturally with. So I'm connecting very easy with movers, very easy with analysts. Observer is a challenge for me. So through this method, I learned, first of all, to recognize observers. Second, immediately try to bring this connection up, knowing what they need. They need a little bit calm approach. If I start going with a mover, like we need to do this and that, and aggressive approach that will excite the other mover or will be even okay with analysts, I lose observer immediately. So if you look at this triangle, the opposite corner of the side that you think you're on is your challenge in communication. So for example, my son is observer analyst, and my husband is observer mover. So they connecting on creating calm, positive environment where I want to steer everything up. So I can connect to my husband through the mover side of me, and I connect to my child through kind of describing him exactly the logic behind it. And so we connect through that. So your challenge is to recognize your own communication personality and also recognize communication personality of people that you have the most challenge with. So that's your homework.
Katerina, so these are the 4 personalities that more often we are going to find out in our daily basis, basically interacting with our clients. Okay, so there is any other place that we can find more information if we want to educate ourselves in the future about this? Or we can contact you directly?
Contact me directly. So I'm putting together the methodology, and it will be a kind of educational presentation on my website. And I'm happy to share it with you as a trial, as it's work in progress, and get your feedback. But for right now, it's still work in progress. So that's something that we're putting together. And the best thing about this, and I've done all the Myers-Briggs and DISC and True Colors. First of all, they're 100 to 75 years old. There is not much of the fresh things out there. And second, you have to put persons through the test. Where here, everything is right here on the face, no test needed. So that's opportunity to get your systematic approach to dealing with people without making them go through any additional tests.